Welcome back to the Pickleball Pursuit podcast. By some divine miracle, we decided that we are going to make a second episode of this podcast. So I am Lewis, your host, here with my co-host Justin, and we're back. We're back.
I would say
didn't think we'd be here.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say you said we decided. We're gonna make a second episode. I feel like the people decided. The people made their choice. Decide. No, to be honest, you guys, we feel honored and a little shocked that we got 1,000 views within 24 hours. I know those are rookie numbers, for most people, but I feel famous personally. So
yeah, I was absolutely shocked. Legitimately, no joke. I thought we were gonna get 100 views, no comments, 2 likes. I was like, this is, God knows what could happen. But hey, we somehow did a good podcast. Probably won't happen again, but we're gonna try real hard today. So we got quite a few topics to talk about. Some paddles that I've reviewed. I think Justin's gonna talk about the PPA that he went to, and then we're gonna be talking about some paddle related metrics and how different edge guards that you put, or edge tape guards that you put onto your paddle, can affect your paddle's performance pretty drastically. And then lastly, we're going to talk about some huge news that is involving the new Gen 3 Joola paddles. And we'll also be talking a little bit about the differences. Yeah, big yikes. Differences between the Gen 1, Gen 1.5, Gen 2, and Gen 3 paddles. So this might be a Justin heavy podcast. So, man, I hope you are ready to talk, because it's gonna be a lot. So buckle up, guys. We're about to nerd out real hard. First, before we get too into the weeds in terms of paddles, you went to PPA this weekend. How was it, man?
Okay, so I'll keep this pretty quick. It was the PPA Texas Open in Dallas. I didn't play or anything. I was just there basically all day Saturday. So it was a fun event. The PPA is always kind of cool because it's just kind of wild mix of professional play, amateur play. You just see all the pros walking directly by you. You can kind of talk to anybody. And then there was a lot of wild card things happening, mainly the weather. The weather was absolutely insane. The weather has been insane in Texas this spring, really kind of since the winter. It's a little bit unbelievable. But it was beautiful in the morning. And then, there wasn't any rain forecasted, but then it just stormed super hard for 3 hours in the middle of the day. And when I say stormed, I mean stormed, hurricane strength winds. It blew down a bunch of fences. The rain was so loud. Luckily, there were 6 covered courts, and then there's 42 uncovered courts. So it's a huge place. Well, because I live here, because I've seen this happen so many times, I kind of saw it coming. Whenever I looked up at the sky, I was like, you know what? I'm about to go get a spot inside. So I went to the covered courts, and there was it was the 3-5 play in there at the time. So no one was in there. It was just dead. But I knew that they were going to probably move the pros in there, because that's what they'll prioritize, of course. So I grabbed this front row seat right in the middle of this court inside, or in the covered area. And then sure enough, as soon as it started pouring rain, they basically pulled all those games and then pulled the pros in. So I got to sit there for 3 hours and watch women's pro doubles, which was awesome. It's just shocking.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, every time I see them play, of course I've seen them play in person. I see them play on video all the time, but it's so shocking when you see them play in person how good they are. It's unreal. Even the most basic shots, it seems even their dinks have more pace. They just reset everything so effortlessly. So it was really awesome. It's always cool to see professionals really in any realm, 10 feet up. So and then basically it rained really hard. I watched that for about 3 hours inside, and then I sent you some pictures about how flooded it was. They were using pumps. They had to. There's a tent that's the store where they sell all the paddles and everything, the Pickleball Central store. They had to have staff in there with pumps pumping out the water because it was flooded inside. So it was kind of unreal. And then it became a beautiful day again. It dried off. I watched the Johnsboroughs lose, which is rare, of course. They were playing great, to be honest, but maybe not great for them. And then I actually watched a bunch of amateur play. I feel like I actually kind of enjoy watching amateur play sometimes more than the pro play, because it feels a little bit more relatable. I watched a lot of the 5-0 bracket. Shout out Pickleball Will and Isaac Olson. I watched their game, their semifinal. It was an epic match.
Dang.
3-game match, and then they ended up getting silver. But
Yeah.
so
I've heard Pickleball Will is a baller, man.
Yeah, dude, they're good. I mean, they got silver in a 32-team bracket in 5-0. So
Yeah, that's wild. That's wild.
but yeah, I mean, it was just kind of the non-pickleball part of the story was crazy. There were at least 10 cars that got stuck in the mud. Two of the cars really like went down this hill to the ditch and almost ran into the fence where the courts are. It was just crazy. But just always, it seems like the weather never perfectly sets up these tournaments. But yeah, dude, I really enjoy going to them.
That's the hard truth about living in the South near, the Gulf of Mexico, or, somewhat near it. The weather can be insane in the drop of a hat. It's just crazy how fast it changes. I mean, it can go from being the most beautiful day to literally tornadoes to back to
beautiful,
bright sunny. Yeah, It's just
wild.
It's
exactly what happened. It was crazy, and I think definitely you could tell the people who weren't from there were like a little shocked. Everyone's like, "Oh my god, are we gonna be okay? Is this gonna?" I'm like, it'll be fine. It's just gonna blow over a few fences and tents, and then 3 hours later we'll play pickleball again. So
yeah, it's gonna cause a couple $1,000s of destruction, and it'll be fine.
Yeah, so I like to go to the PPAs. I really should. I kind of want to make a point this year to go to a lot more of them. Probably should play in some, but
yeah, you should.
My ego can only take so much. So
exactly, yeah, getting your ass beat it's a hard pill to swallow. Trust me.
Yeah.
But that's cool, man. Yeah, I need to go to a professional, pickleball event, whether it's PPA or MLP or even APP, just to see what the top players look like. I have never seen them play in person, so
we should go to the Houston one.
Yeah, when is that?
I'm not sure. We'll have to look it up, but I'm sure there's PPA or APP in Houston, maybe even MLP, but that's a little bit closer to you, so we should go to it. Maybe even play.
YOLO. Yeah.
Maybe a plan is hatched. A plan is
I'm
hatched right now.
I'm going to have to drill a lot. I'm barely a 4.0 in Louisiana. I'm not sure that would stand up too well in Houston and Dallas area, but I could be wrong. You never know.
Yeah, don't worry. I'm a 1.7, so we're good.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I got you. Let's play in, what is
you
that?
Carry
2.5's the average? Yeah, let's play 2.5. Like I'm down for that. Yeah. There probably is somehow some 4.5s playing in 2.5,
at PPA for sure.
These crazy PPAs, yeah. We've heard all the horror stories, but that's cool, man. Yeah, I'll definitely have to make my way to one of those one day. But I'm not a huge professional pickleball watcher. However, I think it'd be a lot different to watch it in person.
It's a great event, like like I said, and I spent a lot of the time watching amateur. I mean, and even when you are watching the pros, it's probably different. Oh, I can tell you it's different watching it on YouTube than watching it 10 feet away from you.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just much more relatable. So, and you'll actually pick up a lot more if you are trying to, improve or mimic them in any way. So, definitely worth going. And in fact, I think I'm going to obligate you to go to Houston.
Say that
now.
again?
We just hatched this plan. I said I think I'm going to obligate you to go to the Houston one now. So we'll figure out the dates after, and I'm going to write it in on your calendar.
Yeah, I need a reason to make a pickleball related trip and just play pickleball for 3 or 4 days straight and watch professional pickleball. I'm down.
And you can make content while you're there, of course.
Yeah, sure.
So it's work.
Whatever. Yeah, sure. Speaking of professional pickleball, I dropped the Christian Alshon Bantam TKO-CX review. If you did not see that, I'm also be giving away one of these paddles to one winner. The short, too long didn't watch would be this is by far one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful paddle on the market, which is psycho to think because it is Gen 1 construction and it's not unibody. I mean, it's crazy to think that there's this much power coming from a Gen 1 paddle and kind of, I guess, completely changes the way that we know or relate power and paddle construction, which we'll kind of get into more later in the episode when we talk about the differences between Gen 1, Gen 1.5, Gen 2, and Gen 3. But yeah, great paddle, excellent spin, not very forgiving, as one would expect for an elongated thin core shape with no edge foam. It does have perimeter weighting in the form of beads in the 3 and 9 o'clock area, which makes this paddle's twist weight excessively high for an elongated paddle. If I remember off the top of my head, it's 7.04 if I remember. But
crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, but I said in my review, I'm pretty much just giving the whole review over right now. That's just what we do here. But we don't expect this to have the similar, sweet spot size or forgiveness or stability of a similar twist weight paddle in a hybrid or standard shape. So just because it does have a pretty high twist weight, it's not going to have as large of a sweet spot or be quite as forgiving as similar twist weight paddles in the hybrid and standard shape. So interesting paddle to say the least. Probably a little too much for me right now. Maybe one day I'll graduate past the hybrid shape control paddles into something a little bit more powerful and poppy. We'll see. Maybe
Don't be
not.
tempted.
Probably not. Yeah, probably not.
What do you got
next is the J3K. Stupid good control paddle. I mean, that's really all I can say. That's kind of my first impression. Super soft, very easy to control, great spin. Definitely going to be a contender for best control paddle of the year. The swing weights and twist weights were a little higher and lower, respectively. Higher twist weights, higher swing weights, lower twist weights than I was expecting. However, it didn't really feel like it affected maneuverability, number one, in terms of swing weight, and number two, it didn't feel like it affected the stability and forgiveness, which was good. They weren't bad numbers by any stretch of the imagination, but 116 was my J3K swing weight, and 7.2 was the twist weight, which is a respectable twist weight number, just a little bit less than,
it's really good.
Some of these crazy paddles that we're getting. Yeah, like the Spartus Apollo was like 7.4 and 108, but that's a wide body paddle.
Yeah.
There's really not that much difference between a wide body and a standard paddle, so standard shape paddle. So yeah, that's the kind of first impressions on that. I'll have a full review of that end of the week. Got a few playing sessions left of that. Need to do a little bit of filming. I probably won't have as much gameplay on this one, which kind of sucks. But I was invited to play with a new group of people twice, 2 different groups of people, and I didn't want to be like a weirdo.
You went on a second date?
Well, no.
You got invited on the second date? Oh, okay.
I went on a first date and then another first date. So I just didn't want to be a weirdo and bring the camera out because they don't know I make paddle reviews and not that it would be weird, but I'm just kind of one of those guys who doesn't want to cause a fuss the first time it would be weird. I'd be the weirdo. Wouldn't be the first time, but yeah, man. So that's what I got next. Shogun should be very shortly after that, and then it's kind of just off to the races with a bunch of different paddles. So things are kind of hard to keep up with nowadays. There's so many freaking paddles coming out, and they're all so damn good. But yeah. So you have some very interesting findings. You have been testing the effects of edge tape in many different forms and how that affects paddles metrics, whether it be swing weight, twist weight. I want you kind of just to lead this discussion and kind of shed some light onto a topic that many people, number one, don't even think about, and number two, have there's really little research or knowledge regarding this topic. So go ahead, Justin.
Okay. All aboard!
Yeah.
This is
time
the
to
train.
nerd out, guys.
This
time
is the train
to nerd
Town. So, this is definitely the train to Nerd Town. So all aboard if you want on. You might want to skip the next 5 minutes or so.
Thank God. I'm going to put timestamps for you guys. Don't worry.
Lewis, this is your chance. You go to the bathroom, get a drink, whatever you need. No.
Yeah, I'll be back in 45 minutes.
So this is something that really has been brought up and talked about quite a bit within we'll call it the pickleball nerd community. So deep in the depths of Reddit and Discord, etc. Like you said, the effects of edge tape. We're talking about the tape that you would put on yourself to protect your edge guard, the plastic part of your paddle. So there are a lot of different options, and I decided to test them all and then see how everything shakes out. So I did essentially 4 different tape setups on 3 different shapes of paddle. So just to make sure we cover all the differences: a standard shape paddle, a hybrid shape paddle, and an elongated paddle. And then the 4 things that I tested were 1 round of electrical tape, just 1 pass, 2 passes of electrical tape, which I feel like is more common. That's what usually when people use electrical tape to decorate or protect their paddle, they put one that overlaps one edge and then, another one around so that it kind of folds over. And then I also tested a medium weight edge tape. And in this case, I used Pickleball Effects tape, which is a great option. And it's kind of, like I said, medium weight. And then I did a heavy tape, which in this case, I used the brand Fourth. They make all kinds of cool colors and designs. It's a really nice product, but it's pretty heavy. It's pretty thick. So Lewis probably going to pop some graphs on at some point as I'm talking about this for you guys to reference. And I won't go too deep into the actual numbers. If you truly want to know the numbers, you can pause and look at them. But I'll just tell you my kind of general takeaways here. And there was some stuff that was pretty surprising. I think the most surprising thing to me was that 2 passes of electrical tape, which is kind of the go-to option for people. And a lot of people who think it's, I just want something light. I just want something little. I don't want to put on the heavy edge tape. I'll just put electrical tape on. Well, it turns out 2 passes of electrical tape is quite heavy and makes a massive difference. The things I tested were the increase in static weight, swing weight, twist weight, and then the balance point of the paddle. And you'll see across all the shapes that 2 passes of electrical tape actually increase the swing weight by like 5 to 7 points, which is noticeable. Like, if you're not someone who gets into this, you may not know what that means. But generally, if a hand test, if you just hand someone a paddle and hand someone another paddle, I would say that 5 points of swing weight is the point at which people are going to notice. They're going to say, this one feels significantly heavier to swing than the other one. So by putting that 2 layers of electrical tape, you've essentially moved your paddle to the next category of it feels a little slower in the hand, it feels a little heavier. Of course, the positive aspects of that is it's going to be a little bit more stable. It's going to be a little bit more powerful. So if your paddle feels light and quick in the first place, no big deal. Throw the tape on there. Now you got a little bit more power stability. You're still able to move it. But if it's already on the edge of a little too heavy, a little too slow feeling for you, and you put 2 rounds of electrical tape, you're going to feel those detriments. It's going to be even slower for you. So that was kind of shocking to me. I was surprised that the medium weight edge tape, in this case the Pickleball Effect edge tape, which is a really nice product, by the way, it was actually lighter than the 2 rounds of electrical tape. So that would be my personal recommendation. If you truly want to protect your edge, it's going to do a much better job of protecting the electrical tape. It's not going to leave residue, and it actually affects the stats of the paddle a lot less. I didn't mean to make a sponsored ad for Braden here, but
yeah, let me see if I can get Braden to give you a promo code so you can get a little kickback on that, man.
I know, right? We'll have to send this to. I met Braden over the weekend. He's a cool guy. But I mean, I'll just say medium tape, and then the heavy tape is what you'd expect. I mean, it makes a massive difference. And then if you look at, like on Amazon, there are not only tapes, but there are kind of the plastic edge guards that snap over and they have the little cutouts where it curves. Those are even heavier. So if you want to buy one of those to protect your paddle, just be prepared. It's going to drastically change the feel of your paddle. It's going to make it feel a lot heavier. And between the different shapes, standard shape, hybrid shape, elongated shape, you would see a larger difference in swing weight on the elongated shape and a larger difference in twist weight on the standard shape or the wider shape. So here we'll even go even deeper into Nerdtown. I'm going to use this paddle to illustrate, of course.
What paddle is that, bro?
Yeah,
Never heard of
it. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, basically picture like right here, lower on the handle as the pivot point, because essentially when you grab your hand on the paddle, that's kind of the middle of your hand. So this is your pivot point. Everything that you want to test the feel of or whatever rotates around here. So the farther up away from that point that you add weight, the more it affects swing weight. Okay. So of course, an elongated paddle is longer. So If you're up at the top of an elongated paddle, of course, you are affecting the weight more than if you're up at the top of a standard paddle, which is probably only this long. And then this is a hybrid one. I'm exaggerating, but so you can see. Now, the same is true for twist weight. The further horizontal you go from this middle point, the more it affects twist weight. So if you put 3 grams here, which would essentially mean maybe here or up here, it does not affect twist weight as much as if you put it here, which is further horizontal. And on a wider paddle, like a wide body paddle, you now have the option to put weight even further afield horizontally. So this will affect twist weight more. So that's the reason why adding weight, whether it's lead tape or tape, affects the swing weight more on elongated paddles, but it affects the twist weight more on standard shape, wider paddles.
Real quick,
also,
before we go, just in case anybody's listening to this, he
true.
did kind of allude to it, but basically the wider a paddle is and the wider you put weight on the paddle, the higher the twist weight is affected. And then inversely, if you put you put weight on the tip of a paddle, the longer it is, the more that affects the swing weight. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah,
you
did.
Tripped over some words there.
No.
Yeah.
And this is not on the graph, but if you're just looking to min-max the stats of your paddle, like a lot of us are, me, for instance, is how I do it. I don't put tape around the edge to protect it. I think that's what the plastic edge guard is for. Of course, it's going to get scraped up, dinged up, but whatever. It's a plastic edge guard. It's made to be protective. So for me, whenever I add weight to my paddle, I just want it for pure performance. So I didn't put this on the graph, but I also tested putting 6 grams, so 3 grams on each side of these paddles at 4 and 8. So essentially right here, and it's pretty much better in every way than these tape scenarios, the protective tape. It's going to increase the swing weight less and increase the twist weight more. And the big one is that it actually doesn't change the balance point of the paddle, or if anything, it might even lower it a little bit, but just a touch. So the balance of the paddle, the swing will still feel kind of similar in your hand, but you'll get more stability, more forgiveness. So definitely, if you just want performance,
touch on balance point a little bit, because that is a metric that few people talk about and few people have an understanding for.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know how deep my understanding is either, but it's basically preferential. You see this in other sports too. When golf, you have putters that are like toe heavy or heel heavy. Those can have slightly different performance characteristics, of course, but when it comes down to it, it kind of comes down to what your preference is, what you're used to, what you feel comfortable with, what swings smooth for you. Same thing with pickleball paddles, right? Like, so you can test your balance point pretty easily if you just set this on a table, and then keep scooting it off until the point where it tips over. And then you just scoot it back until the point where it balances. And then this right here becomes your balance point, which is usually, about here on a paddle. If you add weight below this point, it moves the balance point this way. If you add weight above this point, it moves the balance point this way. And if at the extremes, if you move the balance point higher, you go for a very head-heavy paddle, that's going to paddle that feels slower, but it's more powerful. And if you do the opposite, then the paddle will feel very fast in your hands, and more balance will be in your hand, but it will probably lose a little bit of what we call plow through. So imagine you're swinging through a ball that's coming at you really fast, and maybe it, you don't hit the sweet spot perfectly, so you don't have the perfect transfer of energy. Well, a paddle that has more weight in the face is going to handle that in a more stable manner than one that has more weight in the handle. It's going to try to pivot around, the moment of inertia or the center of gravity, sort of. So it's going to, if the center of weight's here, it's going to try to pivot around here. So anyway, all that said is that higher, more stability, more power. Lower tends to be a little bit faster and a little bit more, for me, it feels a little sharper, I guess, in your hand. You're able to kind of control the point a little bit more. An easy analogy for the extreme is a hammer. If you hold a hammer normally, you're hitting a nail, you may miss the nail from time to time. Hopefully you don't hit your thumb because you don't have great control, but plenty of power. It's going to drive the nail in. Now flip the hammer around, hold the head in your hand. You can shake it real fast, but try to hammer that nail in, and it's got basically no power at all, but you can probably be super accurate with it because it feels like you're controlling a very little tiny lever because all the balance points in your hand. So that's an extreme example. Of course, you're never going quite that far with a paddle, but that's the idea. Anyway. Okay, all right. Time to get off. We made it to Nerdtown and back. Time to get off the train.
Made it to our destination, back to just normal Peopleville. So crazy to think that something that so many people use, and probably 90% of them or more, don't even think about the effects that it has on their paddle.
It's pretty drastic.
Yeah, no, it's serious. Like, that's equivalent to, adding 2 or 3 grams of lead tape to the top of your paddle. That's how much it's increasing the swing weight in some cases. So,
or people who are like, I don't like elongated paddles because they feel slower, and then they buy a hybrid paddle and then they add tape around it. I'm like, well, you just essentially made your hybrid paddle feel like an elongated paddle by adding all that weight around the head. So anyway, if you want to protect it and you feel great with it, that's awesome. But if you're going for pure performance, I would generally advise against tape, unless you feel like my paddle feels a little too flimsy and too fast, and so you add some lead and some tape. So anyway, that's my thoughts.
I'm in the same boat. I don't think a couple scratches here and there on the edge guard is that big of a deal. But also, some people really like to keep their things in pristine condition.
Yeah.
Or they just like to decorate it, and that's cool too.
Yeah. Totally.
I've seen some pretty tight looking paddles with different edge tape. So interesting results. Definitely something that I didn't perceive would have as much effect as it did, but it makes perfect sense when you think about it. I mean, you're adding a lot of weight on the perimeter of the paddle. So so awesome stuff. We have a couple things coming up that I want to talk about. I'll be doing a couple of top 5s and top 10 videos. Mainly, I'll be doing a mid-year top 5 paddles of the year review, picking what I believe are the top 5 paddles that have currently come out this calendar year. One of those paddles that is going to be on it is, spoiler alert, the Mark 1. And excellent paddle, very you wouldn't know. I mean, you never heard of Mark, right? But we're gonna chill out here for just a second. Mark is an awesome company. I really enjoy the paddles that they make, which is why the Mark 1 is going to make it in the top 5 paddles for the mid-year review. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to give one Mark paddle. It can be really the paddle that they're choosing, whether it's the Mark 1, the Mark 2, or the new Mark 1X, which is the elongated handle, the extended handle of a hybrid shape, not elongated handle. People might get confused with that. So hybrid shape with an extended handle. So we'll be giving one of those away to one lucky winner. All that you have to do is like this video, comment down below, follow Mark Pickleball. It's at Mark Pickleball, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll put the name on the screen. Follow Mark Pickleball on Instagram, and then just fill out the Google form listed in the description below. That way we can contact you whenever we pick a winner. So we'll probably pick a winner 2 weeks after this video has gone, just so everybody has a good look at or good chance at watching the video and actually being able to participate. So like, comment, follow Mark Pickleball. And if you want to subscribe to Pickleball Pursuit, that'd be pretty tight too. So,
hey, and y'all, I did not pay him to say this.
We
did agree to do a giveaway. And just real quick, if you didn't catch the first episode or don't know who I am, I'm head of product development for Mark. So that's why we've been making jokes about being a shill or whatever.
Bro, shilling hard.
That's okay. Anyway, so. You didn't even tell them that you have a review. So Lewis has a review. You guys can go back in the channel and look. He has a review of all the new Mark paddles, which, like you said, is the 1, the 1X, and the 2. And he was joking earlier. That's this one that I've been holding up.
Yeah.
This is the 1X.
That was the one he was referencing, and the all the weighting.
Yeah. So it just happens to be the one I have close by, of course. But this is one that I have. I was telling Lewis I have proud dad syndrome about it, because this is something that we were developing for months, and I kind of personally had a large part in. This is the hybrid shape, so it's like flared hybrid shape, only 16.25, but with an extended handle. This is a 5.75 inch handle. I'm probably not the best representation because I have pretty large hands.
Yeah, bro,
But
you got some monster hands. You need that 1X. Jeez.
I know stuff. I know. I hold it one handed like this, and it. But anyway, so
Good God.
but for the giveaway, the Mark 1 is actually the one that Lewis likes. And that just has a 5.3 inch handle, and then we have your kind of traditional elongated shape Mark 2 5.5 inch handle. So there are three shapes, same paddle. Don't go too deep, but give me like the 10-second, and then if they want more info, they can watch a review. But what do you think of the paddles? Who are they good for?
Yeah, great question. Mark 1 is kind of your all-around, slightly power-leaning hybrid shape paddle. Has very good pop, great power, great spin. The most well-rounded of the three. The Mark 1X is a very unique paddle. It's a little bit more offensive. Not quite, didn't feel quite as powerful, but offensive. I mean, it's more of like it's better paddle at the net in terms of speed ups and flicks and kind of hitting those, I guess, more challenging shots. And the Mark II is your typical, very powerful, elongated shape paddle. It's not insanely powerful, but it does have a nice feel to it and is somewhat controllable, so don't be scared by the power. It's definitely easy to rein in, unlike a few paddles that I've reviewed recently, like the Paddle Techs and the J7K Pro. Those are not nearly as easy, so this is definitely a more balanced elongated shape paddle. But if you want to watch more, you can watch the review on all three, which is on my channel, and that way you can have a better idea of which paddle may be best for you. So yeah, giving one of those away, that's just kind of what I like to do. I mean, I feel like, number one, it is awesome for viewers to have a chance to win something that they may or may not potentially buy. So getting some more exposure towards the video as well as the company itself is awesome too, because I do like to review quality products, which is why I rarely have bad things to say about paddles, is because I don't want to waste too much time on paddles that I wouldn't recommend to people. So these are three very high performing paddles that I stand by, which is why one of them is going to be featured in a top 5 paddle. So I sound horrible right now.
Longer than 10 seconds, bro.
I'm shilling,
10
bro.
seconds.
I'm shilling hard. I need to stop. But also, I wanted to touch on, you jokingly said y'all were paying me to do this. But I wanted to kind of like real quickly touch on that side of paddle reviewing. No one has ever paid me to review a paddle. People have offered. I've declined everyone just because I am not a big YouTuber. I don't think I should be paid to review stuff. Would I be open to that one day? Maybe. It would have to be a very specific thing, and there would be no stipulations in terms of what I could say. But that would be very unlikely to happen. But basically, with every paddle I review, it's a paddle that I probably have at least a couple good things to say about, and it's a very high performing paddle. So the Joola Gen 3 is a perfect example. That was a paddle that, although I wouldn't really recommend it to many people, it did have some good characteristics and was something that was very interesting to people. With these paddles, I get a promo code, and with that promo code, I do receive a commission on each time someone uses that promo code. So, for instance, if somebody purchases a paddle that's $100 and my commission is 10%, I would get 10% from that paddle sale. So, just to clarify, for anybody who doesn't know how this works, it is a way in which we can be compensated for the amount of time and efforts that we put into these reviews, but it is absolutely, positively not guaranteed. There are many reviews that I make and put a lot of time in where no one purchases a single paddle from that. So I want to clarify that, because I know some people are different, and if I am paid to do a review, you will know it within the first 10 seconds of the video. So just keep that in mind. Not that there's anything wrong with anybody doing it for getting paid, but I just think it is a slippery slope. So, yeah.
It's fair.
We will get past this and move on to our discussion about the different constructions of paddles in terms of their generation, whether it be Generation 1, Generation 1.5, Generation 2, and Generation 3. So, Justin, I'm going to let you lead this one a little bit more, and we'll kind of just talk about all these different types of constructions, what the pluses and minuses are. We actually had a viewer ask recently in the last podcast saying that they really prefer Gen 1 paddles because they just can't really get behind the power and pop levels that the Gen 2 has. And for all intents and purposes, I do think that Gen 1 paddles probably are better for quite a bit of pickleball players. Gen 1.5 even would probably be even better just because it has, in theory, a much larger sweet spot and more forgiveness and whatnot. So I'll let you kind of lead it off with just kind of telling us what all these different generations are in terms of construction, and we'll kind of give you some paddles that are, within that generation, and then we'll move on to a couple of interesting topics.
Okay. So this was a viewer question, right?
Yeah, viewer question wanted to talk more about Gen 1 paddles, and then I figured, if we're going to talk about Gen 1, let's talk about all the different paddles out, generations.
Well, that being said,
what they include.
Yeah. Well, just that being said, I was going to say, send in your questions, comment your questions. What do you want us to talk about? We probably have plenty of things we could talk about, but it's more interesting whenever we learn what you guys want to hear about, and then you become invested because it's your topic. So please comment here on YouTube, or chat with us on Instagram or wherever, and just let us know, hey, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. So okay, so to get to these generations of construction, let's cover the terminology first. So this Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, etc. I think it was initially coined by one of the reviewers whenever thermoforming came out. It may have been Chris, I'm not sure exactly, but the original style of paddles was pretty much just like what we call like a sandwich paddle. So it was like a face here, and then there's a core, and then another face, and then it's just glued together, just like that. And then you just put an edge guard around it, put a handle wrap on it, and that's it. So you just have
for
carbon
listeners,
fiber.
It's basically a carbon fiber with carbon fiber would be the bread, and then the meat would be the polypropylene core or whatever the core material was.
Yeah, usually a honeycomb core of some kind. And then Generation 2 or Gen 2 came about whenever people started thermoforming paddles. Now picture you have a sandwich with two breads, your faces, and then the honeycomb in the middle. But, this time there is now foam around the edge. And then on top of that, there's a carbon seam. So now there's carbon on all edges. So the top, the bottom, and all the way around the side. So then they put this whole thing into a hot press mold. So thermoforming, another word, is like hot press. And they put it into the mold, they press it, and they essentially bake it into the oven, and it heat welds the carbon together. So now the carbon on the faces becomes heat welded to the carbon around the edge. And there is foam inside around the perimeter like this. And that foam does a couple things. It dampens some vibration, and it also adds perimeter weighting, like we talked about earlier with the edge tape. Perimeter weighting adds forgiveness, makes you feel like you have a bigger sweet spot. It's just basically all around good. So that's Gen 2, right? So Gen 2 actually came before, terminology-wise, before Gen 1.5. Now, we talk about a Gen 1.5 paddle, now you're kind of halfway between. So the first famous one was the Vatic Prism line, and now you take just basically a paddle that has the foam around the edge, but is not thermoformed. So it's not put into the heat press mold. The significance of this, you ask, well, what's the difference? They both have foam around the edge. The significance of this is that when you thermoform a paddle, you put it together and then you put it in the heat press, it heat welds the edge to the face, and that essentially pulls tension on the face. So kind of like a drum. Imagine you have the tight part of the drum, and you pull tension around it, it becomes tighter. So in a Gen 2 thermoformed paddle, now that it's all heat welded together in one solid piece, the faces have more tension in them. And that makes for more power, but it also makes for, I don't necessarily want to say a bigger sweet spot, but let's just say that the hits outside of the sweet spot can still return a decent amount of power. So say on a thermoform Gen 2 paddle, you have a mishit and it hits off the edge of the paddle, but it still bounces off pretty good and gets over the net. On a Gen 1 paddle without that tension on the face, without tightness, you hit the edge, it might be completely dead. Just, dies and rolls into the net or whatever. So that is the perception of a larger sweet spot on a Gen 2 thermoform paddle. Now, Gen 3 is a tricky one because Gen 3 is actually a term that Joola essentially coined with their new paddles, and I guess they did a damn good job of marketing because now it's totally caught on, and other paddles from other brands, people are saying, oh, this is Gen 3 construction. So generally what they mean when they say Gen 3 construction is everything the same as a Gen 2 paddle, a thermoformed, has the edge seamed, it's a unibody paddle, but now there is additional foam alongside the honeycomb core in some way. For Joolas, they put like a horseshoe shape around the outside that kind of lets the core do this, like a diving board. On Vadix, it's more like in the middle, so like foam here, and then polypropylene in the foam, then polypropylene. So there are different ways that this can happen, but that is what people are calling a Gen 3 core now. A combination, of foam in the actual kind of hitting surface area and honeycomb core. So those are the construction methods. Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 1.5 came kind of after Gen 2, and Gen 3. Lewis, what you were talking about, saying a Gen 1.5 or Gen 1 may be better for most people, is that Gen 1s and 1.5, so if you take a non-thermoform paddle, it doesn't have that tension on the face. It's usually much softer feeling, and that softer feeling can be a little bit more forgiving and a little less powerful, a little bit more controllable. So a lot of people could probably benefit from more control in their game, so I think that's probably what you meant whenever you said that.
Mm-hmm. Correct, yeah.
Okay, did I cover the vast majority? Any questions?
No, yeah. Just to clarify, for the vast majority of players, most players are somewhere around 3.0. That's generally where the majority of players sit and reside in terms of their player rating. And at that point, you're having trouble controlling your drops. You're having probably very little resets, if any. And you're just not a control-oriented player because you're popping the ball up and things are not as dialed in. So for people who are kind of near that rating, I would say Gen 1, Gen 1.5 paddles are probably better for you because you're going to maybe have a smaller sweet spot, obviously, but you won't be as susceptible to popping the ball up or not being able to control the ball as much because the paddles are softer and just don't have as much power. So power is good and great and awesome and amazing and cool and fun, but having too much of that is going to be a detriment to your game. So
here's what I'd add
something
to that, by the way, as someone who's on the paddle manufacturer side. First off, I would say 1.5 is almost always better than Gen 1. So get that edge foam. So get a Gen 1.5. The paddle tech is interesting but they are doing perimeter weighting. They're just doing it with the lead weights rather than foam.
Right.
But even still, like you said, the sweet spot's pretty tight on that thing. So that's not a beginner-friendly paddle. So even within what you were saying, I think 1.5 is better than 1. And then here's the next part, is that we as manufacturers have learned quite a bit over the last year about thermoforming, quote-unquote, Gen 2 paddles. And we're figuring out a lot of ways to make softer, more forgiving thermoform paddles. So the Gen 2 paddles from a year ago that were really stiff, unforgiving, those still exist, but not every thermoform paddle is like that anymore. So, and I think you'll see paddles that are marketed as control paddles, as soft paddles that are Gen 2, and that's because we're getting more, familiar with the process of thermoforming, and there are some things that you can tweak in the process to make it feel softer. So
yeah, yep, yeah. There's few paddles too. People kind of associate Gen 2 with being unibody as well. There are some paddles out there like the Mage Pro from Hudef that is thermoformed but is not unibody. So it's kind of
there's another term,
a conundrum. So it's unibody paddles generally have a stiffer feel because there's no flex at all in the handle, and it gives you a little bit more feedback on
and
drives.
What you mean is that unibody means this, all
Yeah.
the way down to here is all one piece.
Correct.
A non-unibody
Yeah,
mean this will be one piece, and then the handle's a separate piece that's then made onto it. So when it says unibody, it means that this face goes completely down to the handle, which most thermoform paddles are.
Yes, yeah. So it's very interesting. Like this, I haven't taken the handle off of this, but this is a Gen 1 paddle. It likely, it could be unibody, but I would imagine that it's probably not unibody. I could be wrong. So, I mean, it would make sense that it would be unibody just because of how much power and responsiveness
I think it
has
is.
off of it. But just so people know, unibody does not mean that it is Gen 2 or Gen 1 or Gen 1.5 or Gen 3. So just something to clarify that is a slight gray area.
I think unibody is a universally good thing, though. Whether,
Yes,
no matter
I would
what
agree.
gen the paddle is, you
It
look
will
for
increase
that
the
in unibody
longevity.
paddle. Yeah.
Yeah, and durability. I mean, I think, what was it, the Franklins that were so riddled with snapping as well as the
The old
Joolas?
Joola Hyperion. Yeah. The
Yeah.
handle would snap off all the time. So
Yeah, because they, the handle was a completely separate unit to the, not completely separate, but it was, it was not a unibody paddle from handle to face, which was causing issues with breaking. So this is not really on the list, but I mean, what is your preference? Like, which generation or which type of construction do you prefer, or even let's go one step further. Which one do you prefer, and which one do you think is best for the majority of pickleball players?
Well, I prefer Gen 2 thermoform paddles. I like we talked about in the last pod, I like stiffer feedback. I like to actually feel the contact in my hand. I want to know where I hit the ball, how I hit the ball, how it's coming off, etc. So I don't mind a stiffer feedback. So even doubling down on that, I tend to like thinner core Gen 2 paddles, which are even more stiff, and that's not like great for in general for the like general public. So that would be my preference. I played with the Prism for a long time, Gen 1.5 paddle. Played great with it. I played with the 14 millimeter version, so a thinner core version.
But of course you did.
Yeah, I know. But I will say that the reason why I left that paddle is because I felt like the sweet spot was lacking, and that my mishits were too punishing. So I moved to a thermoform paddle, and I haven't had that thought since. So definitely Gen 2 for me. Definitely not Gen 3 in this current iteration. I'll say that. Yeah,
I would agree with you pretty much top to bottom. I think Gen 2 is my preferred type of construction. I do think that, like you said, there are a lot of really softer feeling Gen 2 paddles out there. J3K is one of them. And they perform quite well. They're very easy to control, but they still provide that additional power that you need in some instances, as well as durability. So we are going to talk about Gen 3, which is, in my opinion, currently one of the last of the generation paddles that I would recommend for a couple of reasons, mainly because it is very challenging to control these Gen 3 paddles.
You say you would not recommend, or you would
not, sorry. Yeah. They're the last of all the generations. They are the last that I would recommend for anybody.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I think they are by far, without a doubt, the absolute hardest to control. They're very unpredictable. I think they're very unforgiving, specifically the gearbox. And when we talk about Gen 3 paddles, right now the major Gen 3 paddles that we've seen on the market are the Gearbox Power Pro elongateds.
Which is kind of its own thing.
Power Pro. Yeah, which is, it is definitely kind of its own thing. The Joola Gen 3s, which just got delisted. Interesting.
We have to go into that here in a second.
We'll get there. You guys just wait. I act like we have like all these juicy details.
That's pretty well. That basically just happened, and we're burying the lead, putting it 45 minutes deep. To be honest.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Very interesting. But those two are the most commonly known paddles. There are a few others out there, like the Cortec.
Vatic Oni.
The Vatic Oni is another big one right now. I completely forgot about that. And there is one from Packle, P-A-K-L-E, which is called the Silence, which is basically a Gearbox clone that I've been playing with and testing quite a bit. Still cannot dial it in, cannot hit drops, cannot hit resets to save my life.
You better drop it in the trash at this point.
Yeah, pretty much. The only reason I would ever recommend that paddle is to anybody who wants a Gearbox that is not overpriced. So, yeah. The Gen 3 paddles, in my opinion, are not a viable option for many players. If you're a professional player and you want the absolute most powerful, most poppy paddle that you possibly can have, the Gen 3 paddles are good for you. If you're not a professional player or, and
you can get a replacement on demand.
Yeah.
That's an important point.
Exactly. That's a very important thing. If you can get a replacement, as many paddles as you want, unlimited paddles, get a Gen 3 paddle because they are going to break for certain. And we'll talk a little bit about that, which is our next topic, which is why Gen 3 paddles are flawed. I don't think that Gen 3 paddles are the best option for people who are non-professional players, who are not sponsored and are not able to get unlimited, paddles in that specific model that they're using. So, not every single Gen 3 paddle is riddled with as much, quality control issues. I did play with the Core-Tech pretty extensively, and that held up just fine. There are some reports that it did have, foam expanding and then basically getting out of the honeycomb core and then pulling the face off of the, from it, separating it or delaminating it. So there are definitely issues out there, but in my testing, I never had any issues with Core-Tech. Just wanted to put that one out there. So let's talk about why that is. Like, why are we having so many issues with Gen 3 paddles? Go ahead, Justin.
First, disclaimer, this is my opinion, so I haven't done extensive studying on any of these paddles, so this is just me personally, my personal opinion. But we talked about this, a long time ago, and we also talked about it on the Instagram Live, but you and I have talked about this privately, and this isn't anything new. By the way, you might even see, as long as, I guess we'll wait to see where the chips fall with the USAP situation, but there's a chance that we'll see these type of paddles from a lot more brands because a lot of the factories in China are shopping this type of quote-unquote Gen 3 tech. So foam in the core. And they have been for a while. Just full disclosure, like we had a chance as a company to make it and didn't. And something that you said real quickly, you asked me before, not on this pod, but you asked me before, what's the number one thing that like I value when designing a paddle? And predictability is that thing. So I think that having a predictable paddle, when you know kind of where the ball is going to come off the paddle, is the number one thing that's going to help your player performance. And, for us, that's what we value. Even more so than paddle performance is the distinction. We value player performance. We want to the people who use our paddle. We want them to feel like they're performing well. So anyway, I digress. But so why did we not go for Gen 3 construction? Why do I personally think that I don't know that I would say it's completely flawed, but I think it's an immature tech. I don't think it's mature enough to be sold to the masses yet. Is that I don't think the problem is the foam. I think the problem is actually the combination of foam as a substance with honeycomb core. Because polypropylene honeycomb core it's essentially plastic. It's pretty brittle. And we talked about this before, but it's essentially like a bunch of straws. It's like a bed of straws that are, all pointing in the same direction, kind of parallel like this. Which you can imagine how brittle straws are. We've all been at a restaurant where you put the straw in, and then it breaks, and then all of a sudden you have a hole at the side of your straw. You can't drink it. You got to get a new one. So you can imagine that a honeycomb core is essentially all like that. So those little straws, the little pieces of the core, can become compromised, especially whenever they have horizontal forces. In the same way that your straw snapped and then now you can't drink soda through it because it's burnt out the sides. So whenever you combine foam, which can be different, there's plenty of different types of foams, but a lot of types of foams that are elastic expand and contract with heat and cold. So now you imagine you put something right next to a bunch of straws like this that expands. Well, what does it do? It bends these little straws or the core this way. And now you're compromising them horizontally. They were never meant to be load bearing in this direction, only this direction, which is like, here's the face of the paddle. So I think that is the major issue. And that's why a lot of these Gen 3 paddles, right off the assembly line, you're like, cool, everything feels solid. You play with it for a while, it heats up, it cools down, you bang it around, and then next thing you know, you're pressing it in, you're hearing that crunching noise. That is the honeycomb core. Now it's compromised, so it's brittle. So when you push on it, it's going just like little straws that are broken. So that's my thought on why the current iteration of slapping a bunch of foam right next to honeycomb core is kind of an immature tech, and there needs to be a better design philosophy in order to, if you want to use honeycomb core, which I'm not saying it's the wrong idea, but you need to protect it better from the foam, section it off. To be honest, Gearbox is kind of the ones who are doing it the best. If you want to call them Gen 3, I would classify them as something different because they don't use honeycomb core. They're doing their whole own thing. They have, a internal structure, so to say, of carbon fiber, which is a much more rigid material and less compromisable, is that a word, than plastic honeycomb. So anyway, that's my thoughts, and that's why we won't be diving into Gen 3 anytime soon. Number one, I don't find that it's predictable playability-wise. Number two, I don't think that in its current form it is durable or will have long-term integrity.
Yeah. Yeah, and to kind of add to the gearbox, we've seen it's riddled with quality control issues. It's not a super durable paddle, whether that is because it's Gen 3 or just other aspects of its construction. That's not really, my place to, comment. But the correlation of all of these paddles that are utilizing the new or, I guess, classified Gen 3 construction, they're all having tons of issues. They're all having core corruption. They're all breaking easily. It's just goes to show that the technology, like you said, is immature. I don't think that means that it is going to forever be a bad,
Right.
I guess bad's not even the word, but just forever be a non-durable option. I think they could fix it. They could change some things about it and utilize different materials that could potentially make it a more predictable paddle, but still also being very poppy and powerful, which is ultimately what they're going for.
Yeah.
We'll figure that out.
You want to hear my really bad analogy that I said the other day?
Yeah, let's hear it.
I've been trying to think of a better one, man. I haven't thought of a better one yet, but there's a better one out there, so maybe y'all can help me with this. So someone was talking about, Gen 3, adding foam, et cetera, et cetera. And upon the lines of it being an immature tech, I was saying, like, why just add more mud to your straw house to make it a better straw house? I'm not trying to do that. I want to build a brick house. Can we stop trying to use inferior materials and just like patch it up, make it pretty? And can we just move on to using superior materials, something that's purpose-built, designed from the ground up? So that's my philosophy on paddle building. And, hopefully we'll get to see some of that. But that's my bad analogy. And I got to think about that.
You are right. You are right. That was a terrible analogy. No, I'm kidding. No, that was a great analogy. I mean, yeah, of course. Why would you... And I'm sure there's tons of variables. It could be cost. It could be availability. It could just be, manufacturers being able to offer these. But you know way more about that than I do and the reasons behind those things. But currently in our state, that is just the easiest way to do it. And
people are doing the best they can. They're putting fishing weights in the side of their paddle.
Don't
but you love it. Look. Here comes the positive review of Paddle Tech. All I did was, give them all their shine. He called them steel beads. Come on, it's fishing weights, bro.
Fishing weights. Well, that's
fishing weights inside. Yeah. Hey, man, it works. I'm not hating on the result. Yeah. It works, but I'm just saying that's where we're at with paddles. We need to make some major advancements. That's immature tech to say, let's just take this paddle that's essentially built from borrowed materials from a ton of different industries.
Yeah.
Edge guards are, borrowed from commercial countertops. That's the same thing they put around sharp counters in commercial places. Someone's like, oh, we can put this right on a paddle. It'll fit perfectly. Honeycomb core is borrowed from packaging and the boating industry. They're like, oh, this will work perfect. So, and then the handles, let's not even get into handles. I hate most of how the handles are slapped together. We talked about this before we started the pod. So it's just like a bunch of borrowed materials, and then they're like, you know what? Let's use fishing weights and just slap them in there. While it's a small innovation, that's not a jump forward. That's not the future. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. Let's quickly touch on the handle situation that people have been noticing. And you kind of just made it very easy to understand. But there have been a few individuals who have said that they've noticed flex in handles specifically in the Honolulu Pickleball Company Sword and Shield paddles. And Justin was like, oh, duh, that's because the way that they construct the handles, there is basically a plate that is
it's a pallet.
A pallet, yeah. Go ahead. You go ahead and finish it. But basically, yeah.
If I would have known, I would have grabbed them. I have multiples of them. I could have shown you the difference. But essentially, these paddle handles are, how paddle handles are octagonal most of the time. Some of them are oval. Well, it's just a flat piece, and then they put what's called a pallet on one side to kind of give it the bevels, and they put a pallet on the other side that gives it the bevels, so it gives it the shape. Well, a lot of companies use foam for those pallets, and that, like he's showing right there, that's like a black foam, and it's pretty squishy. So it can feel flexible, or it can feel like, especially if you put a couple of overgrips on it, like you've lost the bevels, like you've lost the feel. The other option is you can use kind of a hard plastic pallet, same thing, same shape, just now it's much harder. It's not going to flex in your hand. Of course, that means more vibrational feedback, but that means less loss of shape. And then even beyond that, you can have custom molded handles of multiple materials all the way up to carbon fiber. And that's essentially like a tennis racket handle or badminton or racquetball handle. Those are all like molded. They're basically one piece or two pieces that are sealed together, and they feel solid. That's why when you pick up a tennis racket handle, you're like, wow, this feels so much more substantial and also sharper usually than a pickleball handle.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
and it's a pet peeve of mine. I have a big gripe about pickleball handles and the current state, but
yeah,
we'll get better.
Yeah, just to kind of reiterate how this discussion came up, somebody was asking me in the Discord for Honolulu Pickleball Company, and they were saying, have you ever noticed flex in the handles? John Q was saying there was flex in the handles, and then a couple other people have said that as well. And I was just thinking to myself, like, how can these unibody paddles be flexing at the handle? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I would get the handle and try to flex it, and like, there's nothing that's happening. I'm not sure how they're perceiving this flex, and that makes perfect sense. They're just perceiving that from the way that the handle is construction.
Yeah, immediately he asked me about that, and I was like, "You have one close by?" I said, "Pull the grip back. I bet you has a foam pallet." And he pulled the grip back, and we saw it was a foam pallet. And I was like, "Yeah, this is something that I have personal experience with, and like I said, it's a pet peeve of mine." So
yeah. So anyway, that was a subject that kind of wanted to quickly touch on. On to the final topic. The Gen 3 Joolas have officially been banned and will not be relisted on USAP's approved list.
Yeah, and not banned like
insaneness.
They could never. Yeah, it's not like banned like, oh, these will never be approved. But I mean, I think this is huge news. It's completely unexpected, and who knows what we're going to see from this. If there's going to be any type of litigation, I wouldn't be surprised. But it also just kind of changes the landscape of, paddle creation, because every other company that was in process of making a Gen 3 paddle is probably going to be like, whoa, pump the brakes. Whoa. Because, as you know, the Joolas were delisted because of the quote-unquote admin error whenever the wrong paddles were sent in. And they said, then they found out later, oh, these aren't the right paddles, so we can't put them on our approved list. Right? So the story behind that was then Joola is going to send in the correct paddles, and then no problem, USAP is going to test the correct paddles. They'll be relisted. No big deal. Right back on the list. Well, the statement just came out like hours before we did this that Joola sent back in the correct paddles. USAP tested them and said they fail. So no, they won't be put on the approved list. They failed testing. So, and these are the Gen 3s that are out in public, the Joola Gen 3s that are in the mass market. This is going to be chaos. I'm sure more is going to develop.
Everywhere. Every single day that I go play pickleball, I see a Joola Gen 3.
Dude, and I've already heard they've already been super hesitant to return. The last person I talked to said that they contacted him 13 times over like a week and a half, going back and forth before they would finally accept their return of an unused paddle. So you can imagine even more returns are going to come in. I don't know what Joola's going to do. This is a huge financial hit for them. I mean, I'm not placing blame anywhere. It seems like clearly there were multiple parties who maybe didn't have their shit together involved in this. And that's big news. I mean, and then the other part of the statement that came out, you guys can read this. It's on the USAP thing, and they put it on Twitter or X or whatever you call it these days. And the other part that was kind of confusing is that...
Okay, boomer.
I refuse. No, I'm just kidding. They put on there that, that supposedly... The wording is confusing. Of course it is. But USAP made it sound like they knew about this issue since before the official launch of the Joola paddles. But yet, of course, it didn't come out that they were even delisted until a month after the launch. So what's that gap about? Were they giving Joola the benefit of the doubt? Were they like, did they know before the launch and say, hey, by the way, these are the wrong ones? And Joola was like, oh, it's good. We have the right ones. We'll send it to you. And then a month later, they hadn't sent it in. So USAP's like, our hand is forced. We have to delist them now. Who knows what happened? And I'm really curious to see the details. But this is going to make massive waves in the whole industry, like big time, because is this going to birth another governing body? How many other companies is going to affect? Is there going to be litigation against USAP? How much is it going to affect Joola? How much is it going to affect the customers and players who purchased from Joola? So we don't have any of those answers, but wow, it's kind of shocking.
Yeah,
not what I expected.
Completely outsider's perspective, I feel bad, but like it's almost comical. Like it really is. I mean, this gigantic company sends in these paddles, gets them approved, they start making production models, and then all of a sudden, we sent in the wrong paddles. That's what the story is still, right? That's what they're sticking to, is like they felt that it was an administrative error that they sent the wrong paddles in and then sent the new ones in, and they also failed. It just kind of... things aren't lining up, and I don't want to get too far into rumors or creating rumors. It's just there's way more to the story than we will all ever know, and it just kind of cracks me up. I feel bad for Joola, honestly, a little bit, because definitely they're before this Gen 3, I felt like they were a very reputable company, and although they made some paddles that broke easily, they tried their best to make good paddles, and I've never had any reason to dislike or feel like they've done things wrongly. It sucks for them.
I agree. They've become like this big bad boogeyman, But I don't think that. I mean, I think they've made good paddles and had great marketing.
Well, I don't know if they have great marketing. I mean, have you seen the Gen 3 commercial?
Well, listen, I'm not
looks
saying...
looks like a Disney.
It's clearly working. Whatever they're doing is clearly working because they are one of the top sellers. That's what I mean.
For sure.
They've had great market success, put it that way. And they've made good paddles, for a long time.
Yeah.
So
with all of that
being said,
crazy. I enjoyed playing with the Gen 3 paddles. I did not think that they were a good paddle for me, but I did have fun playing with them. So like... I think I mentioned that pretty, candidly in my review. I enjoyed playing with them. I thought they had phenomenal performance characteristics, and there was a few things that just made it completely appealing to people in my level and below, and that's why I don't think that they're that great of a paddle for the masses. So it's a very interesting thing. I'm very interested to see how this goes forward. If there will be any other retroactive, um, I
Yeah.
guess, decisions on other companies. I think everybody's looking at Gearbox, wondering how in the world they
Yeah,
are
you know,
clear and good to
that's the other
go.
thing, by the way, which I won't say any paddle names on this, but we had the industry call a few weeks back where it was like all the manufacturers were invited on a call to USAP for their coefficient of restitution, basically is power testing, what they're going to move to in the future. And they were demoing the testing. They said, later this year, we're going to move to this new testing method. They showed a graph that had 50 paddles that they had tested, and basically most of the paddles were bulked into one area. However, there were a few outliers. They didn't label these, by the way. They were just dots on a graph, but they pretty much said, they implied in the meeting, we haven't set a number yet on what will pass and what will fail, but we expect that a vast majority of paddles will pass. However, these outliers will fail, right? Well, there was news today. Now, I'm not going to say the paddle brand or name of the paddle, but this is an approved paddle on the approved list. An owner came out and said, hey, USAP contacted me and said that our paddle will likely be removed from the list by the end of this week. And also on top of that, what it was the top paddle out of their 50. So now we know which one of those three outliers was. Which, as far as I knew, the core testing or coefficient of restitution wasn't going to happen until much later this year. So this is shocking news. And this, like you mentioned, this is the type of thing that could majorly affect other brands if they are going to try to enact this testing now and, kind of remove paddles off the list. Worth being said that this paddle that I'm talking about is not for public sale yet. So maybe that's an easier thing to tackle for both the company and USAP to say, we're moving it off the list. You guys haven't even gone public. But maybe something, quote unquote, like the Gearbox, theoretically, might have been one of those outliers too, of course. But they have been selling for a long time. There is something within the USAP's literature that has a grace period that says basically if the rules change or something along those lines and your paddle no longer passes testing, you have essentially like an 18-month, I think is what it is, grace period before it gets delisted. And that gives the company time to kind of sell out of their stock in the next 18 months, gives the players who own it plenty of time to play with it before, getting their new paddle.
Yeah.
But anyway, I didn't know I was going to share that. But so that's another layer below. And maybe we can share more details next time, but I don't want to say anything out of turn.
Of course, yeah. And that would make sense. I mean, in terms of just giving them a grace period, that, especially Gearbox. I mean, they have been approved for so long. It's been like, what, 6 months, 7 months that they've been approved for?
Yeah, they were way ahead of the game on that.
Yeah, I mean, is it too powerful? Yeah. I mean, it's by far, in my opinion, the most powerful paddle on the market, especially in terms of pop. Like, it is not, there's not even a single paddle that is even close to that.
Also worth noting, real quick, we didn't even say this, that USAP in their statement said that the Joola paddles failed, so they won't be put back on the list. But they haven't come out and said why they failed.
Yeah,
they didn't say, oh, they're too powerful. It might have been the grit that failed. It might have just been too gritty, which is a much simpler thing to fix. In that case, Joola might be able to make a new production badge and add a serial number. Just this is the same thing that happened with Carbon last year. And then make the grit lower and then get them right back on the list. So we don't know. There's so many details we don't know, but it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, very interesting landscape going. Very interesting stuff going on in the landscape of paddle approval and the governing bodies of pickleball rules. So we shall see some juicy stuff, man. We've probably told y'all nothing that y'all don't already know. So we hope we're bringing some value to you guys. Probably not, but yeah. As Justin said earlier at the beginning of the podcast, we would love to hear if you have any comments, questions, or topics that you would like to have more information on or hear from us talk more about. We're open to really anything. We will obviously continue to prep topics for each podcast, but we would love to implement some of your user questions or user topics that you would like to hear. So thank y'all very much for all of the excellent feedback. I mean, I think we had like 15, 20 comments of people, and like half of those were like, man, this is a good podcast. Like,
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Was not expecting that. Yeah, I was not expecting that at all. Very happy with how that went, and definitely gave me some more fire to do this. I enjoy talking with Justin about paddles because it's something I'm very passionate about and clearly enjoy making content about. So, yeah, hit us with any questions you'll have. Justin, you got anything else before we sign off, man?
No, just you guys just be prepared. I'm gonna rope Lewis into a tournament. I'm already thinking. I'm about to get on pickleball brackets right now. I'm gonna make him play a tournament with me in Houston, and then you'll get to hear about how he carried me. So look forward to that. And
there's
yeah,
no chance I'm carrying you, bro. No chance.
Thank you guys for watching, and yeah, talk to us.
Yeah. All right. Let's see if I can nail the outro on this one. I'm Lewis. This is the Pickleball Pursuit podcast. Thank you for listening and watching. Hope to see you on the next one. I'm Lewis. This is Justin. We're out.